Yes, welcome everyone to our 50 years and the first event of our 50 years and beyond celebration, our thoughts on the Beyond Public Lecture Series. So first, I would like to just do an acknowledgement of country. So members of the CSU community, we acknowledge the words of the Wiradjuri people on whose land our university was founded and share their aspiration of Yindyamara Wananana. The aim for us all to learn the wisdom of respectfully living well in a land worth living in. And I pay my respect to the traditional custodians of the lands where I live and work. That's the Gadigal and Birabirigal people. And I also extend that respect to any First Nations peoples present here today. So I am Casey Garrison. I'm a senior lecturer, and just this week, our associate head of school for research in the School of Information and Communication Studies. Again, I encourage you to introduce yourselves and share your country or location in the chat. So yes, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever and whenever you're joining us from. Thank you so much for coming to our first lecture in our public lecture series for our 50 years and beyond celebration of the anniversary of the School of Information and Communication Studies at Charles Sturt University. We have a few events planned throughout the year to recognize our school's growth and changes from our starts in the 1970s from the Riverina College of Advanced Education to the Riverina Murray Institute of Higher Education to now the School of Information and Communication Studies at Charles Sturt University. So we're really excited to celebrate our Golden Jubilee this year and happy to welcome you here to listen to distinguished scholars in our field from across the world, like today's scholar. So before we get to that, just some quick housekeeping. So please do stay on mute. Feel free to add things to the chat, but if you do have questions that you'd like us to get to after the presentation, there is a Q&A available, so you should find that at the bottom menu. If it's not showing up, if you hit more, the more button, it should be there. So you can pop your questions into that. And Gary will get to those at the end and I'll facilitate that. So with that, I will hand over to our head of school, Professor Tina Du, to introduce today's lecturer, again, the first in this series.
Thank you, Casey. And good morning, good evening, good night, everyone. It's my great honor to introduce Dr. Gary Marchionini, our first distinguished public lecturer to present his talk. Now, let me first introduce Dr. Gary Marchionini. Dr. Marchionini is Carrie C. Boschema, Distinguished Professor and former Dean of the School of Information and Library Science at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He served as a dean from 2010 to 2021 and has been a faculty member at the school since 1998. A leading expert in human information interaction, interface design, and digital libraries, Dr. Marchionini has published over 200 works and secured grants from organizations including NSF, NASA, and Google. He served as an editor-in-chief of ACM Transactions on Information Systems and was president of ASIST, the Association for Information Science and Technology, in 2010. Dr. Marchionini's accolades include being named an ASIST Fellow in 2024, receiving the Award of Merit in 2011, and LITA Kilgour Award in 2000. His current research focuses on data science and information syncing interfaces. Without further delay, please join me in welcoming Dr. Gary Marchionini to present his talk.
Thanks, Tina. And you should be able to share now, Gary.
All right, can everyone hear me first?
Yep, all good.
All right, good. What happened to the
Sorry.
share? All right. And we're doing this one, I think. All right, can you see that okay?
Yep, all good. You're in full screen mode.
All right,
so full
technology, it's amazing. So, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you, whatever time of day it is for you. Here in Chapel Hill, it's 5 o'clock p.m. But I sure wish I was in Australia. It's a beautiful land, and maybe next time. Let me, first of all, see if I can advance these slides. No. There we go. Okay. So congratulations to Charles Sturt University. I mean, 50 years. That's fantastic. So this will be a bit of a celebration. Congratulations, wishes for the next 50 or 100. Here's a bit of an outline of what I've got in mind today. I'll start with a bit of historical context of library science, information science, and the evolution of these fields or field, depending on your point of view. I think of it as a field, but we can debate that. And a lot of this is about sort of, in my opinion, and filling gaps. And it's important that it's bridging not just across people and across domains of knowledge, but across time. And so one of the things that we always keep in mind is our allegiance and responsibility toward preservation of the past, so that we can have a better future. Our field has been generalizing and broadening over time, and so that'll be another theme I'll hit on. We've got a bunch of challenges. As always, we have issues of funding. How do we continue to grow and educate the best information professionals in the world? Serve people in the future. What's our scope? What's our identity? We argue about this all the time. I think that's perfectly normal and perfectly fine. If we weren't, we wouldn't be alive. So there's these definitional and identity issues are not signs of dysfunction, but rather important for our growth. What I'll focus on is sort of three classes of, I guess, what I will call challenges or directions or themes. There are others, but I'll say a few things about data science, some more about AI all the time apparently now, and then our social responsibility and impact. All of that will be sort of tied together with our, I think, secret sauce as a field, which is our human-centered focus, in which we're high tech, but we really focus on people first. And so that's our kind of our brand, right? The iSchool socio-technical perspective. So I'll use a theme of bridges, and so clip art is free and inexpensive. So I'm horrible with doing my own artwork, and I didn't want to use DALL-E 2 or one of the generative AI systems. So I just grabbed a bunch of clip art of bridges. So you'll be seeing some bridges, but keep in mind, we're talking about across people, time, and disciplines. So let's go back. Well, most of you can't go back this far. I can, and I see a couple of people on the participants who probably could as well. But 1975, 50 years ago, what was going on? There is, I think, a good amount of social political change. So one thing that was important to sort of me as a relatively young person at the time and living in America was the end of the Vietnam War. So this was a big turning point for people of my generation. Something that's a bit more international and was that the U.S. and Russia actually collaborated on a space docking event in which it showed great possibilities for a world ahead that was not about the Cold War or a real war. It was optimistic and forward thinking. It was also a time of not just civil rights, which were quite emerging and active in the 1960s and beyond, but also of a recognition of the rights of women and the power and of women in our lives. And the United Nations declared 1975 the International Year of Women. One little sort of side thing, just politically, Thatcher that year actually won leadership of the UK Conservative Party. She eventually, a few years later, became prime minister. And so it was a time where we were going through some changes, and I think a time of optimism. A loaf of bread cost 33 cents US. That's 43 cents Australian in those days. I don't know what it costs today at the IGA or IGA in Australia, but when I go to Whole Foods, it's like $6. So it's a big change in terms of just the differences in cost. From a science and technology point of view, a couple of little highlights here. The Altair 8800 microcomputer kit was released. I was ecstatic. I would go to these hobby stores and imagine I could afford to buy one of these microcomputer kits and build my own computer. It was pretty exciting, and you'd pick up Popular Mechanics or Science or something, and people would be talking about this sort of not just giant computers, but personal computers. That same year, Sony and Matsushita both released alternative versions of videotape. So Betamax and VHS, or Beta and VHS, were released and competed in the marketplace. I think there's an interesting story here in which the better technology, Beta, lost out to VHS for a variety of reasons. But we've seen this in lots of other cases. If you think about a few years later with microcomputers or early computers, the Texas Instruments early computers were 16-bit. They were much better architected and designed than the stuff that IBM, Apple, and others were doing, which were 8-bit computers, but they lost out in the marketplace for a variety of reasons. And so not always the best technology wins in the marketplace. There's an important message for us. Microsoft was founded in 1975 officially, and at that year, Steve Jobs and Wozniak were building the Apple I in their garage, and Apple was founded the following year. So just to put in context, think about the changes since then, both socially, economically, and from a science and technology point of view. So here's my first bridge clip art. Things change, and we have to adapt. And I like this bridge drawing because it not only shows multiple kinds of information flow, if you will, but also the changing directions that and adaptability of our field. So some trends. Librarians have always been collectors, preservers, and sharers. And those are three important words, and we could spend a good amount of time, and if this were a class, we probably would spend a bit of time on each one to see what you actually think those words mean. The green is to highlight that it's not just any information, but curated information. We're not just sort of willy-nilly, anything on the pile goes. And that's an important thing for us to keep in mind, because it's a double-edged sword with respect to trust. And so librarians have always, or have long, been trusted as sort of doing what's best for the public good. And in today's world, that's being challenged in often unfortunate ways. So if you just look in Wikipedia, simple definition for a librarian is, person who professionally works in managing information. So pretty generic. But if you look for an information specialist, there's a new wrinkle here. It's the same sort of functions that a librarian does, organizes, disseminates, but in a context, in this case, a company or organization. But the important sort of difference, I think, is that they also analyze data. And this is actually something that is worth kind of reflecting on, because traditionally, the librarian's role was to serve the patron's need, do the reference interview, whatever you needed to do to figure out what was needed, and then provide the information for them, but not try to interpret it. It was up to them, and in fact, it was their private right to do that. And so you didn't follow up with, let me help you. Here's what this means. Unless you were in, say, a school library where, that was part of your job task. But information specialists, I think, have been drawn into more of the analytics and the analysis. And this also, I think, has implications for some of the erosion of trust, because you start interpreting and sort of claim that you have some understanding, then you put yourself in the position of power and authority. And that's not bad. I mean, people should come to smart, well-trained people for good, advice. But we're not always sure what role we're playing. And sometimes the patrons aren't as well. And when we go from librarian to information professional, sometimes we slip into a role that, I think has consequence for us in the long run. So, we've gone through a bunch of transitions in the last 100 years, 50 years for sure. We've gone through this transition from kind of analog to electronic/digital, and now into this sort of hybrid cyber world. And this has happened across storage, across communication or transfer, and across media types. And that will continue. We shouldn't be surprised, and we should be ready for it. We are active players. We're not just passive users. We are in or have gone through this library science, information science transition, and I'm not sure that it's so much a transition as just a natural evolution, because as I think I said earlier, I don't view these as separate fields. I think we really are much more integrated. We have transitioned from a strict focus on really just collections to collections plus people plus interactions, and now more and more these analyses. And so that's a transition that you might say, well, that dilutes us on the one hand. On the other hand, it broadens what we're able to do. I personally sort of go with the notion that the broadening side is a better long-term play for us. We've gone from local to global. I mean, look at what IFLA has been around a long time to sort of bring librarians together around the world, and the iSchool movement is truly international. I mean, it started in the U.S., but there's more schools in the iSchool consortium that are non-North American than in North America. So it truly is an international movement. We've gone through these transitions, and we'll go through more. There's a question mark in the second from last bullet, because I think we may be in a data science AI transition, although as you'll probably gather from my tone and my comments as we move along, my point of view is this is my third iteration of AI is going to save the world. And so I'm a little bit skeptical and a little bit, wondering about, where's the smoke, where's the fire, how much of it is hype, and so I do know that there are important, useful things happening, but a lot of it is really pretty much marketing. And I think we are in a time of struggling with how much do we sort of try to converge on a few core values and ideas versus specialize in different fields. One of the things about librarians is that, at least in the U.S. And there weren't any undergraduate library degrees. The idea of American librarianship was that you were trained in some discipline, chemistry, history, whatever, and then as you came to graduate school and you learned librarianship, and you were able to actually take that knowledge of a discipline and apply it and leverage. And so whether that was the right model or not, I don't know, but that's sort of where we've been. And now we have a lot of undergraduate programs all over the world that aren't necessarily library science only, but they're information science. And the students who come to us with their to get a master's degree, a Master of Library Science or a Master of Information Science degrees at Carolina, they're much better prepared to think about information and media and technology than I think that we were in the past, because they've had classes related to information studies, information science, what have you, before they do their masters and get their credential to be a licensed or professional librarian. So we have a tradition of building bridges. I'm sorry this doesn't look like a librarian, but it was an easy thing to pull. And we build the bridges. We're not just walking over them. Libraries are important. We are memory institutions, and we've always been crucial to progress and culture. And I think it's actually more important than ever, because things are changing so rapidly. People are confused, and everything is contested and questioned, and fake news, and what's real, what's truth, who do we trust? We really need, and we are players here, and we're getting, in many respects, sort of edged out by other professionals, who see this as a growth area. And for our field, we need to redouble our efforts to focus on our traditional values of memory and history and primary materials whenever possible. Libraries evolve. There are new kinds of collections. It used to be mainly books, and now there's all kinds of things. I mean, libraries check out tools and cooking equipment and paintings and all sorts of things. We do more education than ever. We become community hubs. There's a brand new public library in Carborough, the little town next to Chapel Hill, that just opened. A beautiful new library, a public library that is amazing. But it's all community. And the recreation department is integrated with the public library. And one thing that we tend to forget, there are a lot of libraries. I mean, there are more school libraries, at least in the US, than there are public libraries by a long shot, but there are more public libraries than there are Starbucks or McDonald's, and there are a lot of those. So we are important. Now, I used a version of this slide at ACES last fall, and I got a lot of encouragement to write something about this, and I've just not gotten around to it. But librarians have always been about technology. I mean, I think I saw Linda Smith on this was writing about artificial intelligence back in that generation when she and I probably were relatively new faculty members, we've been involved in things all along. I mean, think about classification systems, card catalogs, the mark records, circulation, integrated systems. I mean, we've probably heard of Raghunathan, but have you really thought about, what a mathematician was doing, trying to talk about classification? Otlet, more of a political scientist, talking about classification and its power. Margie Havala, who, sort of invented a whole taxonomy industry and probably still runs the biggest taxonomy company, who works with companies and government agencies all over the world, helping them organize and manage their valuable assets. Interlibrary loan, DLC, the National Resource Information Clearinghouse, Medlars from medicine. And then in the earliest days of the internet, before the web, Gopher, Archie, Veronica, these were created by librarians. They set the stage for, let's index on the citation or the title rather than on just some menu of things that somebody thought up. Think about the things that librarians created: readers advisory systems and recommender systems. I mean, Novelist was, it's been 50 years. I mean, EBSCO bought it 20 years ago. It was a recommender system for books. Amazon started out as an online bookstore. So Jeff Bezos wasn't a librarian, but he got it that he could probably make some money by selling books and using recommendations to sell more books on his first online bookstore. Bibliometrics has done. We had people like Gene Garfield and Don Swanson. I mean, Don Swanson, some people think is the father of data mining. I mean, he was doing it manually, trying to make connections between mutually disjoint literatures manually, and this. Garfield creating some of the earliest bibliometric tools, citation indexes by hand with lots of students in Philadelphia. Those are things that Google wouldn't exist if Page and Brin, when they were students at Stanford, weren't influenced by librarians who were on the digital library project by the National Science Foundation, who knew all about citation indexes. And they're in the other early systems was that they built indexes on links, because I'm sure those librarians helped them understand that a link is really a citation. And so let's build indexes on the citation, on the links, not just on the words. And they won in the marketplace. I wish they'd give us more credit for that. Librarians invented pathfinders, first paper ones, but eventually electronic ones. Braille books, screen strategies to help people access information. We've been innovators in literacy and reading with various e-tools. Think about the Internet Archive, Wikipedia, Hattie Trust, digital libraries. These are powerful, complicated technical systems that are built by librarians for the world. Think about what happened in the pandemic. I mean, public libraries were often where people got Wi-Fi. They'd go and they'd park outside because there was free Wi-Fi. So we've been doing this for a long time, and we shouldn't be surprised and we shouldn't be fearful. We have new bridges to build and new changes to overcome. So I want to shift now to some of the current challenges and maybe themes for, where at least 3 themes I think are important. So first, let's do the data science trend. So, this talk 4 years ago would have been data science, data science, data science. It's all the hype of today, right? Between data science and blockchain, everything's going to be great. We got data science now. We got schools, we got departments, we got classes, we got it all. But the world still goes ahead. So some of the questions for us are, who does data science? Is it only statisticians? Is it only computer scientists? No, it's all of us. Who teaches data science? Well, I mean, we've got a school of data science, but we also have a school of information and library science at Carolina, and we both teach lots of data science stuff. How do these applications differ from the core principles and techniques? I mean, do we have faculty who are creating new statistical techniques that get embodied in algorithms? Not so many, but some work on it. But we've got plenty of people who are applying large-scale data sets in really interesting ways using some of those kinds of new algorithmic tools. And so we have a role to play. An important paper by a statistician from Stanford defined data science as the science of learning from data. Great, nice, simple, straightforward, like it. I've used a little bit different sort of definition in that it ties it closer to what I think we do. We think about the phases, the life cycle, and so generation, use, assessment, transmission, and action are things that we sort of look at the whole picture. And this goes back to some of my core beliefs about information as intellectual energy, with data being sort of a supporting character and knowledge being what we'd like to do with this energy. And as we move across these layers, we have increasing context and human input. So here's a model that I guess I wrote about, 9 years ago. And I tried to sort of lay out the difference between statistics, computer science, information science, and all the knowledge domains, and what they did. And so our role was really mainly about organization, metadata, ethics, representation, preservation. Whereas as you might expect, the statisticians were dealing with inference and summarization, modeling, evaluation, and so on. The important thing is this notion, this circle up at the top. At the time, everyone was saying, well, all the jobs are going to be information science, statistics, and computer science, and we all argued over who was more important. But the real importance was the knowledge domain, history, chemistry, whatever it was. Lots of applications, thousands, maybe more, hundreds of thousands, certainly, of different kinds of jobs and applications of data science. That's where really the impact is going to be and is happening today. And what we do well is we bridge silos. And so, the castle with the moat around it had like a drawbridge and a well protected. We want to break these things down and try to make things more open generally. So our roles are to bring a human-centered perspective, an interdisciplinary approach, and to serve as a bridge across those silos. And we do this through our understanding and explanation of the data life cycle, which I think is a core idea in data science, but it's one that doesn't get, in our schools, it gets covered a lot, right? We talk a lot about this, but in a data science school or a computer science department or a stat department, probably not so much. So, at the genesis level, where stuff starts, what are the sensors? What are the surveys? What are the Qualtrics instruments or what have you, where the data is being collected? our role is not only to help create those things, but to think about what are the conditions here, conditions of consent or cost. I mean, what are the policy issues? You know, how do we sort of document the provenance and cultural appropriateness of these things? Because no one else is going to talk about it, right? And so we need to be there at the table at the beginning. And so we think about the genesis of where the data is coming from and how it's being collected. We also have important roles to play in collection and management. You know, our indexing, you know, our naming and metadata schemas are used in data science. We can give advice on cleaning and storing and sharing policies. We also in the data analysis to some degree. Now, not as much as, say, the statisticians or the people in a particular area, a field like chemistry or history. The data analysis for us is really to perhaps try to look and understand whether those algorithms are the proper ones and what kinds of at the very least, documenting what went on so that when the lawsuits happen 10 years down the road, you know, there's somebody who, here were the underlying assumptions, here's which algorithm was used, here is who was responsible for making that decision. The data interpretation, use, and communication role, again, you know, that's we have roles there. They're not as strong as those first two, but you know, we're people too. We get influenced by this stuff, and so we want to make sure that you know, we're looking at it from what are the consequences. The consequences not just to you and your, you know, your particular project or your company or your library, but what are the consequences to humanity? Finally, two other roles, preservation and reuse. You know, that there's another place where we're extremely strong and people would take us seriously, I would hope. You know, we have a long tradition of talking about and practicing good stewardship and governance for data and for making sure that you know, things are available not just as backups, but also as in archival forms. We also have expertise in auditing workflows and documenting decisions. Got former students who are data auditors in major companies. I mean, these are things that are roles that we can play. And then finally, growing the context, adding the history, animating knowledge. If we don't do the curatorial note work like a museum curator could do, who will? Okay, so that's the data science sort of trend. Lots going on there. It's not as, you know, gaga exciting as it was 5-10 years ago, but it's there. We're a player. Let's talk about AI. So it's all AI all the time. I mean, I am up to here with AI is going to, you know, do this, and you got to use that, and you know, have you tried this greatest? Yeah, I'm trying a lot of it, and just some pretty cool stuff. And you know, I encourage my students to use it as much as possible. I started my life as a math teacher, and one of the things that when calculators were first invented, the Math Teachers Association said we're banning calculators from the classroom. And it's like, I don't know about that. And it lasted, I don't know, a year or two, and then all of a sudden it's like, no. We have to integrate calculators in the teaching of mathematics. Happened with computers. It's the same thing today. You know, it's just another technical trend we need to sort of learn how to leverage so that people can learn better, so we can teach better, so we can do better research. So I think of it as another iteration that is, you know, driven by large-scale data, and the data can be for predictive AI or for generative AI. You know, read the book AI Snake Oil, and brilliant. I mean, a great computer scientist who understands how this stuff works. Basically saying predictive AI doesn't work. Don't believe it. You know, generative AI, you know, it's interesting. Let's keep an eye on it. I think, you know, that's probably a sensible way to proceed. You know, we take advantage of not only this large data that was basically collected on the backs of people paid 20 cents an hour to do data collection or data analysis through Mechanical Turk or other sort of strategies, or artists or photographers or news people who put stuff on the web and then it just got scraped up and they never got any benefit from it. So, you know, there's a lot of data out there. We got a lot of great algorithms, both deterministic and probabilistic. One of the keys is that we're not just using deterministic, we're not just using probabilistic, we're layering them together, and that's actually, you know, it's not just a doubling effect. There's a synthesis there that is what's making generative AI so interesting. Of course, we got tons of hardware and networking, and I don't believe we need, you know, trillions and trillions of dollars in data centers and all the energy that it takes. But, you know, somebody's making a lot of money selling those dreams. There's enormous hype, there's fear, and there's hope. Okay, so that's where we are. But there have been a lot of past broken bridges here. Still hopeful. So why should we, as ILS professionals, be, you know, active and engaged? A year or two ago, I was working on, you know, an answer to that question, or at least a brief one. And so there's a piece on Medium, and then a piece in JASIS, an opinion piece about why information professionals. Why should we be involved? This will remind you of some of the things I said about data science. First of all, we're concerned with integrity and trust, and you know, we're you know, we believe in people, not just in, you know, making a profit. You know, we have long traditions of managing huge collections and information streams. You know, as I've said earlier, we've been active pioneers. We've done a lot of cool stuff and technology, and we'll continue to do that. You know, we really, I think, again, a secret sauce is we're going to take the human side. We're going to start with what's good for people, what's good for the public good. And I think that's important, that somebody is really fundamentally human-centric. And, you know, we've been human-centered in evaluation research. And we've, you know, been responsible stewards, not just of the information and data that we're responsible for, in thinking about policies, open access versus, you know, what shouldn't be open access. How do we preserve human memory that's equitable and culturally sensitive? We think about these things. And then, you know, we're committed to sharing. You know, we've always been sharers. That's part of what we do. We collect things and we try to share them. And so we have lots of important roles to play in this sort of AI world. Now, I tried to put together a set of actual more specific things that we do or we can do. So we should be involved in the inputs. You know, I've used Mechanical Turk to actually run some of our user studies over the past, and you know, I guess I didn't feel so bad that we were paying people like $1 an hour to, you know, do searches for us, but it didn't occur to me that that was probably, you know, building a research base on the backs of people who, you know, couldn't afford to do. Who needed that money to actually exist, and I didn't, and I hope that data didn't get gobbled up by, you know, all of these you know, crawlers, but they probably did in many respects. And so I think we're all somewhat guilty about the inputs, the training sets, either helping to gather them or to be part of them. And one thing that's bothersome to me is that more and more, especially now that New York Times and others are suing the AI companies for the content that they just gobbled up for free, um, uh, they're generating data automatically. They just have machines out there generating data that then becomes the training set for deep learning. I mean, this can only go bad in the long run, where you have a machine making up stuff and that's then used to be ground truth for training models that are going to affect people. So we need to be involved in the inputs, at least in terms of let's try to figure out and document where the heck they're coming from and who's using them and how. Now, another role that you'll hear people talk about is use, right? Prompt construction or prompt engineering and refinement. I mean, we've been great at this. We sort of invented Boolean-based retrieval before the web, right? We've taught people how to do complicated Boolean queries, and today the prompt engineering stuff is kind of beginning to sort of filter down to question asking. And so if it's a chat bot that we're interacting with, then don't think of it as a single instance. It should be an iteration of questions and refinements and questions and refinements and nuances. Because if you just get out your favorite thesaurus, and for the prompt that you start with, take every word in it and do a variation with other words, you'll not get always the same results, right? So these things matter. We understand this. We've been doing this for a long time, but most people don't. And so we need to be more active in helping people understand this kind of prompt construction and refinement process. We've always taught search. This is just search, 2025. Outputs. And this is where our documentation skills come in. Well, let's document not just the output, but the workflows, disclosures, declarations, the citations. I mean, thank God that a little bit, they're starting to actually give links to something so that you can maybe check something out. Unfortunately, they're still not great, but we'll get there. But we need to check the output, and if we can't check it from a content point of view, at least we can document it. Evaluation. We invented whole new evaluation methods in retrieval. I mean, in the early days of the TREC conference, the information retrieval conferences, everything was just recall and precision. It was people from the information and libraries side of things who said, well, let's talk about something like user satisfaction or time, or how people are feeling about this. I mean, let's try to not make it be just a mechanistic measure. So we need to also think about metrics that are more human-centered when people are using these AI systems. And then education, that's one of our roles and so we need to help the next generation understand and not just accept, but ask hard questions. And finally, to reflect, to actually sort of think about policies, think about what it means. What is this doing to us? That's part of our role, because I don't think Zuckerberg and Altman and Musk and all the other guys are going to be thinking about it. I mean, so we really need to press on that. Okay, so that's the AI sort of trend. We have roles to play. We should not just let this be up to to everybody else. Third trend. This is oh boy, I got to go fast. A bit more closer to my heart. It's I think where where we really need to spend some time and effort. And part of it is it's a challenge to trust. There's all this stuff out there. It's in these repositories we help build, and things are expertise is under attack. I mean, this little quote is just frightening from 2018. Now, this is 7 years ago in science. You know, science is being questioned. People don't want to believe it. Well, that's a problem. And we as information professionals being challenged. Librarians are especially being challenged. And this is not good. I mean, it's good to be challenged, but it's not. It's a little bit sad that it's so blatantly wrong and ill-advised. So, how do we start to deal with this? Can we leverage some of these technologies to help us? Would you like an AI agent on your editorial board that you serve on? I was involved in starting a journal that did this, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. And we never really had agents per se, but the idea was to create a data journal where the publication were data sets. Humans just can't look at them and understand them. You got a data set of a million or a billion data points. We need something to help us. And so we have to sort of imagine maybe there are some ways where we actually do leverage some of these technologies as long as the humans are in control. The human in the loop and the public good in the mix. We're pretty cognizant of this challenge, and I do think it's incumbent upon us to continue to not just advocate for the public good in the mix, but to be practicing it. Now, I've been engaged for I don't know, 5 or so years on thinking about cyberspace and our identity and new kinds of information and this concept of the information exposome. So the exposome in a biological and environmental sense is all the things that affect our physical bodies from birth to death. And there's centers, there's sort of, it's about a 10-year-old field at this point. But we really need an information exposome component. And so what are the effects of the digital streams and experiences, both the intentional ones and the ambient ones, that affect us? And they're physiological, neurological, psychological, and holistic effects that more and more people are starting to talk about and think about and actually do some research on. So one that I've written about is your personal identity. Now, this is personal, so it's for an individual, not for society or humankind. I try to imagine, what are the surrogates for me or for you out there in cyberspace, in this exposome. So first of all, we push out a lot of stuff. We project into cyberspace consciously, a web page, a Facebook profile, emails, all that stuff. We're conscious. We know that. But there's a lot of implicit stuff. And I mean, a lot more than I think we ever really think about. Your click streams, your information, your eyes moving across the screen, your mouse movement behaviors and patterns. So those are our projections, conscious and implicit or unconscious. Then there are reflections of you in cyberspace. What others say about you. They tag you. in social media. Oh, Gary was here at this time, or hey, so I might know about that or not, and that's fine. But the second kind of reflection is enormous, and these are what the machines and algorithms, and there are a lot more machine cycles in the world than there are humans, and they're constantly humming and twisting and trying to say something about you, profile you, sell you more stuff, right? That's the motivation. And so there are these projections, there are these reflections, you put it together and you get this concept of your proflection in cyberspace. And I think it's a fundamental new kind of information, and it's what yeah, a challenge for us in the world. This is a graphic, of what I just said. And because of we're closing in on the hour here, I'm not going to reiterate, but this is basically those conditions. Here's the one that's kind of interesting, though. This is me over there on the left. That's me. Here's my image of me, my identity, according to me. Now, here over here's my best friend's image of me. Well, it's not too bad. I mean, it's a little dotty, and so it's not quite as defined as my image of myself, my personal identity within my mind. Somebody maybe I've met, but I'm not, really close to. Their perception or their identity image of me is much less well defined, right? It's pretty broken up. Now, if you take all those collectives of all of those various images of me or my identity, your identity, it's a blur. And this blurry figure here is meant to represent your cyber identity. And I would claim that most of it is not in human wetware, but actually in the exposome. And all of this needs to be taken into account because institutions also have their impressions of our identities. Your public library, your police department, your national government. Yeah. They also have that identity. So it actually turns out to be consequential. So what does this mean? Well, I think our work practices change. You think about your reputation index, your H index, what have you. Those are things that add some sort of perceived value to what you might mean. And more, there are companies, businesses, academic institutions, government agencies who are trying to measure and assess that for a variety of reasons. Usually it's economic, but more and more it's control. And so we live in a surveillance economy. See this? This is my personal surveillance device. It's exactly what it is. It's a phone. It's my smartphone, and it surveils me all the time. If it weren't surveilling me, I couldn't even make a phone call. We're only beginning to find ways to begin to manage in this kind of world we've created. Now that's the exposome from a personal, individual point of view. But now think about the public sphere. What are the institutional analogs to personal identity? Is it groups, people with a community? Is it a country? There's all sorts of ways to slice and dice socially. And what are the analogs there? You know, when kids hit just pre-puberty and early puberty, their hormones go crazy. And there's a hormone that is usually called the love hormone. And what it does is it starts to change the way they think, and they really get close to their friends, and they roll their eyes at their parents. And this is physiological. It's well documented by developmental physiology. The thing that's kind of interesting, though, is that they also get much more negative about the out group, either people who are not their friends or groups that are not their friends. So from an individual point of view, we have this physiological inclination that we can't even control, that affects our lives. And now if you take that and you think about social media and groups, then that that hormonal influence is why there's Twitter wars or X wars or all of the things that are going on. It's analogous. So we need to think about what are these, sociological sort of perspectives, not just the psychological, individualistic one. What are the implications for, governance, civic understanding, equity, and fairness? I mean, there are lots of things for us to grapple with and try to understand from a human-centric public good point of view. And I am getting close to the end, so bear with me. Here are some fundamental questions. What does everyone have a right to know? Have you ever thought about that? Do you have the right to know how to create a biological weapon? Do you have the right to know how much taxes I paid last year? What do systems have a right to know about each of us? Well, if you're paying attention to what's going on in the U.S., we've got a group, the Doge group or Dodge group or Dope group, depending on who are getting all kinds of personal information from 350 million people. A little bit frightening and disturbing. What can we do? How can we influence the discourse in this exposome that is not just about us individually, but about the groups that we care about? We can't even agree on what the rules are. What does it mean to have a civic debate or a civil debate? We're dealing with this in university campuses all over the place. How do we try to, encourage that without everybody yelling and screaming at one another? Classic one for us is, how is public intelligence made accessible? That's right in our bailiwick. And should there be limits? Now, there's a ton of people who've been writing about stuff like this for a long time. Here's just a few examples. My sense is that the real problems are not in today's AI, but in the AI that's connected to analog processes and biological processes, and the kinds of things that generative is an important word. And when you start generating, it's one thing to generate some text or numbers or some graphic screen, another thing to generate life forms. And we're doing it. It's happening, and there'll be a lot more of it. You think the implications of the horror stories from AI today are there. Just wait. Now, what can we do? Where are we? How do we sort of grapple with these issues? I think we do what we've all, which is to build bridges. We bring people together. people from all kinds of fields, and then we try to apply our expertise, their expertise in ways that try to understand each other and solve our problems. I mean, the global challenges of climate and health and poverty and peace, they're not going to magically go away, but they're important. We can't do this alone, but we do know how to build bridges. We do know how to build communities. We do know how to bring people together across disciplinary boundaries. And I think that's another way that's what makes us so valuable, so potent, and so important in the world today. So here's a very tranquil, nice kind of bridge. That's what we want to be working on. A world in which we're happy and well. And iSchools are a good place for that. We're bridge builders. We have human and needs and public good at our core interest, and we attract talented people who want to share those values and interests. So good luck building those bridges for the next 50 years. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Gary. I love that idea of us building bridges. It's so important in this time, as you noted. And we do have a few questions and a little bit of time for those, so that's great. I'm going to go to Anita. So her question, she said, thanks for the excellent talk. Having seen the changes in our profession and sector across time, what is your view on the increasing trend of people with no LIS qualification holding high-level key decision-making positions at information organizations like libraries, archives, etc.?
Well, we're a big tent. I mean, I guess I would sort of come down a little bit on the side of inclusivity rather than exclusivity. So do we want people who are not knowledgeable in running our public library and who are doing like dumb things? No, but I wouldn't say, oh, you have to have an ALA accredited degree to do it. I think that's that. So let's help them do a better job.
Thanks for that. And then this anonymous participant is actually Kay Adoni, but she wasn't able to post. So Kay asks, what strategies do you believe are most effective in advocating for the growing importance of library professionals' capacity to educate about information literacy and critical thinking? There are so many concerns about misinformation and the demise of civic knowledge, as you noted.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had a magic wand, but I think there's we all have a role to play. We have to talk about it. We have to, if we can influence 5 people and there are 250,000 of us around the world, and then we're over 1 million there. Now that's not a lot in a world of 7 or 8 billion, but it's a start. And I mean, that's really what we can do as individual humans. Now, can we, become influencers? Does anyone want to see our TikTok, 5 seconds on how exciting it is to be a librarian or to be an information professional? I don't know. Be creative, maybe so, but I do think it often boils down to individuals making a difference. I mean, think about the people who have touched your life. Certainly, parents and family, but beyond that, like maybe a teacher early on who just kind of said the right thing that got you inspired. I mean, we can do that, and so we can touch individual lives. And if there's one thing we've learned from the sort of globally connected world we live in, things do propagate. So I don't think there's a magic solution. We can write papers, we can If you can get on the news shows, great. But people tell me no one listens to the news or watches the news anymore. And all they do is look at social media. And so get on your social media accounts and I mean talk about things. But don't be disappointed because people. I mean, our physiology is set up to respond to fear, anger, danger. I mean, we would die. I mean, literally, if that wasn't what was kind of in our our brainstem. Motion gets your attention, because if it didn't, you'd get eaten by the tiger or what have you, right? And so that's hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. We have to overcome those things. So I think face to face, individual people talking to others is maybe the most practical thing. I mean, if you got a big media presence, social media presence, use it. But I don't.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Gary. Any other questions? We're all out on the Q&A, but if anyone, another question in the chat. Anita has a curriculum question. So we generally integrate new technology across our curricula when covering particular issues and contexts. Is this your iSchool's approach for AI, or do you have standalone units that introduce AI and machine learning?
We have to do a little both, but mostly the former. I mean, I'm a believer in integrating things across the curriculum rather than sort of, okay, we got another add-on. Because every time you add something on, you got to take something away or something else, suffers. And so I think it's actually much better to try to integrate things across the curriculum. I mean, I think about let's just talk about GPT for a second. In a class in which you're dealing with issues, it's pretty easy to talk about those issues and actually go in and sort of do some little on the fly experiments with how would Perplexity handle this search? How would ChatGPT respond to this prompt as opposed to Gemini or something or one of the others? In technical classes, it's actually a little bit more problematic. So my colleague Rob Capra had a really cool solution for his database class. So in the introductory database class, there's one of the key ideas is entity relationship modeling. How do you actually design? What are the rows? What are the columns? What are the tables in a database system? So it's a great, it's a traditional library problem in some ways. How do you organize the books? Or, and so modeling it's a design problem. It's not a right or wrong. And so he found that, students were very quickly just using Gen AI to actually, provide the ER diagrams. And so very quickly it was like, okay, this is great. Let's start with those. And so instead of, you're saying, oh no, you can't do that. Let's take a bunch of them. Let's do analysis. What are the pros and cons of actually slicing and dicing the data this way versus that way? What's better to have this be a primary key and this not? And so, using these tools across the curriculum, I think is pretty easy if we just think about it. Who can't think of using a word processor or an Excel spreadsheet? They used to be alien things, and now they're just tools, and they're common, they're ordinary, and so this will be also common and ordinary, and they probably should be across the curriculum. Now, are you going to have some, workshops or specific training? And sure, you can do that just to build skills up. But I'm guessing that your students will probably be able to teach them more than you will.
Thanks for that, Gary. And maybe we'll end with your question, Tina, if you want to go off.
Thanks, Casey, and thanks, Gary. I think this is very, very interesting and very inspiring talk when you mentioned about the social political change to this data science trend or this AI trend. What ILS professional can do, the convergence approach. I think this is a very, very complicated time or age we are in. For one thing, like my 12-year-old, he he really keen to use Spotify to listen to music and using ChatGPT to support his assignments or essay or even public speech. Then sometime last year, the Australian government issued a social media ban for children under 16 years old. But he's still using social media at home anyway. Also, when you talk about these libraries are important, and communities, they play the communities hub for all different types of serving their community, local communities, older adults, immigrants, people with different cultural backgrounds. They all is kind of social cohesion, social capital libraries create for people. The people, they all keen to have these social links, face-to-face links. Libraries seem to play very important, meeting place for people, and the service hub for different communities. And we all talk about the AI, impact, not just using tools. They are not just the tools, but they are influencing the traditional industries like medical science, medical industry, even the auditing industry. So I read news the other day, for example, the DeepSeek is applied in the auditing industry to helping the auditing business. So that's fundamental changes in this, complicated, or you could see this the new revolution of the human civilization because of this technology. So you also mentioned about what we can do as information professionals, and people also ask me a couple of times, I was saying a number of times. So what does information science do? What is the information science? So what's your insights? I wonder what your opinions, insights on what we can teach or what we should teach for nurturing the future generations as information science or library information science discipline.
Well, that's we have a 48-hour master's degree that sort of covers those things. So there's a lot, but a couple of things that I think it is important for us to do is to not lose sight of where we've been. Our history. Things do tend to recur, and I mean, I can't tell you how sort of rapt undergraduates are when they hear an old geezer like me talk about like telephones that were attached to the wall, or things that it's like, yeah, I sort of heard that, but you were alive then, or and so trying to ground our students in that this is not it's not pointillism, it's not points in time, it's a continuum. We live an analog life, not a digital life. We discretize and chop up our analog life and a lot of the things that happen in our world so that we can process them with these digital tools. But fundamentally, we're analog devices. We're streams. We're flows, and if we can get our young people to think about that. I think it's good. If you can get them to not use their phone for a day, that would be amazing. There's more people trying this to sort of break away from the constant connectivity. I had some guest speakers in my class 2 weeks ago from the psychology and neuroscience department who have the coolest project I think in the world. It's all about longitudinal studies of adolescents and their use of social media and IT, and they do studies, diary studies, they do transaction loggings, and they do annual fMRI scans of their brains. And they have evidence that their brains are changing, and it's correlational connections to their whether they're spending 10 hours a day on devices or 3. And it's not just the total number, but what they're doing in those activities. And so at the end of the class, and my students were like, "Whoa, this is great," and they were asking all kinds of questions. And the one was like, "Well, what would you advise?" And one of the professors said, never allow your child to take a device into the bedroom ever. Just don't allow it. Their sleep is already screwed up by the time they start entering puberty, because again, different hormones, melatonin, starts to change, and so they're already sleep deprived before there was ever technology. And now what you're doing is you're just exacerbating an existing sort of transition state in the physiology, the developmental, a pretty dramatic developmental state. So, having our students think reflectively about what the heck they're doing to themselves, what they're doing to others, is, I think, pretty important. Now, there's lots more to say here, of course, but those are just some things that I'm on my local soapbox on today.
Thanks so much for that, Gary, and for taking the time to share your work with us and your perspectives on this topic. So yeah, that's it, everyone. I will just note that our next lecture in this series is going to be from Professor Emerita Diane Olberg, and Diane was actually in the session earlier today. And yeah, that's going to be in May. So Diane will be speaking from a teacher librarianship perspective. Yeah, different side of information studies. So I believe if you've registered for the series that you'll get updates on that. That's what theoretically the technology has told me will happen. So I'm going to believe it. Yes. So thanks so much, Gary. Thanks everyone for coming, and hope you have a great night, day, afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks.
Thank you very much.